Being born and growing up in a house with two famous parents is unusual, I would say, except that I didn't think it was unusual because it was normal to us, my sister and I. My father, King Vidor, had the longest film career in Hollywood. He made films from 1918 to 1959. He made 56 movies. He was one of the true originators of American cinema. Among his best-known movies are The Crowd and The Big Parade. These were two silent films which had great impact. Fountainhead, Duel in the Sun, War and Peace, and so forth. These were among the best known ones, best remembered ones. Eleanor Boardman was my mother. First she was in silent movies, then she did a few talkies. She always looked beautiful, no matter what kind of role she did. Howard Hughes fell in love with her, and he'd always come over and watch the filming going on of a movie. He was born in Texas, and went through the Galveston flood, which killed thousands of people and flooded all the houses. And they escaped from an island to the mainland. Maybe that gave him the courage to go through any kind of a crisis in his life. His first job, I think, was selling tickets in the movie theater. So he was there, he had to be there every night, and he kept seeing the same movie over and over and over. And he would watch it and begin to learn how it could be improved here and improved there. You learned something about making movies then. Well, anyway, they got in the Model T Ford, drove all the way across the country with many, many flat tires, arrived in Los Angeles with like $3 or something. But he was determined, so he made it. And he learned how to write stories. He learned how to operate the cameras. He learned the lighting. He learned the costumes, the acting, everything. Eleanor Boardman, she was born and raised in Philadelphia. She went to the office in New York of Louis Selznick. He said, get on the next train and go to California to get in the movies. She was anxious. She didn't know how to act. In those days, her family, being very puritanical, regarded movies as something terrible, you know. But she was very independent spirit. So she got on the train by herself and went across country. So she appeared in a Kodak ad, and it was a beautiful picture. It appeared in all the drugstores in America and everywhere. And so here she comes in the Hollywood, in the studios at that time. One day, my father saw her, and he suddenly recognized that it was the same girl on the poster. And so he said he'd always been in love with her. He immediately fell in love. The Crowd, which was the movie that she starred in, that King directed. She had to play a kind of a dowdy housewife, and she didn't like to play those kind of roles. But she said Vidor knew what he was doing, and I trusted him. And that turned out to be one of her best pictures that she's known for. In fact, she was pregnant with me at the time, so towards the end of the movie she had to kind of wear a coat and stand behind a couch and so forth to hide the bump. The director of the Wizard of Oz movie was called away at the very end of the picture to work on Gone with the Wind. So my dad stepped in without asking for any acknowledgments on the screen. And he directed the first part and the last part, the black and white parts. He had a lot of fun directing that. He would occasionally invite us to the studio to watch him make a movie, how it was made. He was always very calm. He just lightly directed the actors. Marion Davies was my mother's best friend. She was the lover of William Randolph Hearst, who was known as WR. Marion would frequently invite my mother up to San Simeon, and then we would come along with our governess too. So we really enjoyed it. We just had a ball there. We would come to breakfast by ourselves with our governess, and and early, and they all slept late. Everybody else slept late. So sit in this room that was like really a cathedral, and this enormous refectory table, and here we were in these huge red velvet chairs, two little children, our governess, so we'd have breakfast there. We swam in the pools there. They were wonderful. They had an outdoor pool like a Greek mansion with columns, a black and white tile. I would love to swim there. And then they had an indoor pool. The water was warmer and it went around corners into another room. My sister and I swam there a lot and loved that pool too. Eventually, Marion and W.R. invited Eleanor and us to come to his castle in Wales. We stayed there for several months. After the visit, my mother decided to go to London. I was very angry at my mother that we hadn't gone back to California, and my dad, he would occasionally pop up in England, just show up unannounced, and take us off to Italy, for instance, where he would play golf there, and then he'd bring us back to England and disappear again for another year or two. We stayed in Paris until the Nazis came into France. Everybody living in this apartment had to go down underground because of air raids. So my mother decided it was time to move out of Paris, so we moved down to Biarritz. One day at school, our dad shows up, unannounced, unexpected, and picks us both up. We got in a taxi and we crossed the border and drove all the way to Madrid, Spain. He was taking us to California. He didn't trust us being there till the end of the school year. So she did have nearly a total nervous breakdown until she found out. But it was too late to go after us because we were across the border in Spain. So then we took the last Italian boat going across the Atlantic. And then we got on a train, came all the way back to California. My mother came over on the last United States boat. They get in the middle of the Atlantic and a German submarine comes along and said, well, we're going to sink you. So my mother threw her fur coat over her nightgown and got into a lifeboat. Finally they said, okay, we won't sink you, you know. So she made it over to California also, and then she had to take us to the court to get custody of us. And so, of course, we put on our best manners and wore our white gloves and then impressed the judge no end. And so, of course, he awarded us to her. When I came to this country from Europe and settled with my mother near Brentwood, a German by the name of Egon Mertz had a stable there with some horses, and so we learned to ride and we loved it. We were just teenagers. Every girl had a mad crush on Egon. As I grew up, I acquired a horse. It was thoroughbred, but this horse was too slow for the track, so it was bought for me, and I took it to high school with me down in La Jolla. Egon had bought a piece of property in Malibu. He had a ranch, he had horses there, so we went out to ride. I fell in love with Egon. I was going to Stanford at the time. Every single day he would write me a letter. We ended up by getting married. We eloped because I knew that my parents would not approve of me marrying my riding instructors. But it's just the life I wanted. We lived in Malibu. It was in the early days, and we lived a very natural lifestyle, close to the earth and the beach. We had a ranch across the highway with horses and corrals, and we would ride there, and we'd also grow our own vegetables. And he had goats, which he milked every day, and we had chickens, and had my first child in the hospital. But you couldn't get any sleep or rest more than 20 minutes at a time because the hospital was so busy. Finally, I decided, I had enough of this, I gotta go home. After a day and a half or something like that, I went home. And took care of my baby there. And my second child, 2.5 years later, I decided I'm not going to go in the hospital, I'm going to have it at home. And that was very radical in those days, but it worked out wonderfully. It was fine, and they were both on horses at a very early age. Chris was riding his own little pony at the age of 4, and Gina would ride in front of her dad. Her dad would take her on the horse, and they'd go on the beach and all that. That was a lot of fun to ride on the beach. It wasn't crowded or built up or anything in those days. I taught a lot of horseback riding to children. My daughter is now teaching their grandchildren. We put on horse shows all around the state, Santa Barbara, San Francisco. We had several horses that were sent to us, for one thing, because we were near the ocean and could get the horse in the ocean. Elizabeth Taylor was given the horse that she rode in her first film called National Velvet. His name was Pie, for Piebald. He was lame after that movie, and she couldn't ride him, so she sent him over to our ranch, and he would take this horse down into the ocean, which was very healing for their legs when they were lame. So it finally recuperated, but she would come down and visit this horse, and she loved animals, and she was very unsophisticated and natural at that time. One day, Gina had contracted a cold. There was this abscessed ear. It was very swollen. We bundled her up, got in the car, and drove all the way into Hollywood to this man who was Hungarian. He was a concert cellist and knew everything about herbs and healing, and he never touched her, he never looked at her. She woke up the next morning. She was friendly, she was alert. Most of the swelling was down. And I thought, my God, what did he do? You know, so he was a psychic healer also, and I thought, well, I got to know more about this man. I had been a spiritual seeker and had gone around to everybody that came to Los Angeles in those days, like Indra Devi taught yoga and Maharishi Mahesh yoga. So when I found this man, I thought, oh, he must be enlightened, and he had lived 4 years with Ramana Maharshi in India. I began to get this connection that spiritual life wasn't just about meditation and trying to get somewhere on your own. It had to do with purification and the health of the body. So I went to him regularly as a student. I learned a lot from him, and he taught me all about healing and made me get into learn things like acupuncture, which wasn't known in the United States. Nobody did it. By listening in on his patients and what he said to them and what he did with them, he gradually began handing them over to me. So then I was treating people, sometimes up to 5 people a day for an hour or two, and I did things like Jin-Shin-Jitsu, which was balancing polarities with your fingers, and it predated acupuncture. I learned a lot, and I learned to heal, and I was amazed at some of the healings that would come out of people. But eventually, I had kind of given up that I was going to get any enlightenment. My seeking had failed, and I was kind of at my wit's end and ready to commit suicide because I couldn't get enlightened. But then, of course, I had family, so I couldn't do that. You always think you find the guru. The guru finds you when you're ready. And when you're ready is when you've given up on everything. The ego, I, me, is what stands in the way of self-realization. What brought me to Adida was kind of accidental, except that there's nothing accidental about him or anything else in life. I had done a whole spiritual search with many gurus. I'd tried them out thinking they were it. So I was totally disenchanted of any guru. I didn't think I could get enlightened in this lifetime, and I was just finished with searching for gurus, for enlightenment, for teachings, anything, anybody. and I saw this little brochure with a picture of the head of a man with his eyes closed. I opened it up and it said, when seeking fails, spiritual life begins. I thought, wow, that's me, exactly. All my seeking had failed, and I was long ago far removed from even looking for a guru. So I didn't jump immediately to him. I wanted to kind of test it out and see, is this real or not? Enlightenment is not something that we can do by ourselves or to ourselves. So it takes an enlightened being, an adept, that can see the whole picture to know exactly what we need to do to transcend or finish those particular karmas. What caused us to incarnate here to begin with? What are we attached to? That's what we come back for. Well, the first time I met Adida was at the sanctuary called the Mountain of Attention. And this was an old Indian hot springs, very quiet up in the mountains. I was invited to come up to the sanctuary. I was such a serious yogi type. I was very humorless. He stood up and he called me by name, which surprised me because I had never met him before. But I could feel this impediment at the heart. Later on, we had a darshan with Adida, and that means you sit and you receive his transmission. I was way at the back. I just asked him, please remove this impediment that I feel at the heart. And the minute that I asked him that, even though it was silent, he put out his hand from way up the front, and I was breathing heavier and heavier, faster and faster. And pretty soon all this sorrow began welling up in my heart and coming out, and I began sobbing. So I got down on the floor, lay down on the floor, and sobbed and sobbed. I was getting self-conscious. Everybody else is sitting quietly and not a sound in the room. I thought, well, if I can't let go here, where else could I let go? So I just let it all rip. 100 tons of weight had been lifted off my shoulders, had been taken off of me by Adida. And I thought, wow, he had me, so to speak. He'd shown me. He says, I show you everything in the first time I see you. I came to Kauai in 2002 because Adida had moved here and he was inviting people to come on retreat. I rushed over from California and he invited me to stay longer. So of course I was overjoyed. But I fell in love with the island and I didn't want to leave at all. And I sat in the hall in the Dome Temple. I sat there and I meditated first morning, and I was flooded with this incredible love, bliss state the whole hour. And I thought, my gosh, why go anywhere else? This is the best place. I'm going to stay right here.